The vast majority of missing people are found relatively quickly. Even those who are missing for extended periods of time leave behind clues. Sometimes these clues leave police more confused than they were before. However, even more confusing is when people vanish without a trace. In cities where CCTV appears to cover every inch, these people disappear into thin air. Number 5. Luke Durbin was 19 years old when he went missing after a night out with friends in May of 2006. The night began like any other. On May 11th, Luke met with friends at a friend's house. He left his phones and other belongings at the house as he was worried he might lose them. The group went to a nearby town where they visited pubs and clubs and drank and did drugs. At the end of the night, early on May 12th, the friends went their separate ways. CCTV cameras picked up Luke leaving the last club they visited and trying to catch a taxi from a nearby ring. Possibly because he left his wallet at his friend's house, he was unable to get a cab, so decided to walk to the nearby bus station. At 4 a.m., CCTV captured Luke walking towards the station. It was the last time he was ever seen. Luke was reported missing by his family when he didn't return home. Progress was slow to begin with, but police later realized there was likely more to this story than a typical missing teenager. When he was in his early teens, Luke had begun taking drugs with his school friends. He was known as someone who could get people the drugs if they just asked him. According to his school friends, this eventually spiraled into full-blown drug dealing. By the time he went missing, police believed he dealt drugs every day. Police believe Luke fell into the County Lines gang. County Lines is a big issue in the UK, where gangs use vulnerable children to transport illegal drugs from one area to another. Going against the gangs can be very dangerous, and it's believed Luke had a debt to one of these gangs. CCTV from the night of Luke's disappearance showed a white Volvo going in the same direction as Luke about 10 minutes after the teenager walked out of frame. Police were able to identify there was a car matching the description in the area at the time, but it was registered under a false name and address. Now they believe the car was being used by members of the gang. In 2012, 2 people were arrested on suspicion of his murder, but were released without charge. 2 years later, remains were uncovered that were believed to belong to Luke, but these 2 turned out to be animal bones. Luke's family made the extent of his connections to the gang public in a documentary last year, as they hoped someone with information might come forward. Police are currently following leads called in after the documentary was broadcast. Hopefully these will lead to answers and closure for the family. Number 4. When Jose da Silva left his apartment in Perth just before 2:30 p.m. on April 30th, 2017, it seemed as though he would be back in a few moments. There was washing in his washing machine, and a mop bucket indicated he was in the middle of cleaning. He left his wallet, keys, bank cards, and phone in his apartment and went downstairs. CCTV from the apartment block showed him walking down the apartment building stairs, wearing a long-sleeve blue top, shorts, and flip-flops. Reports say he left the building, though footage of him actually exiting has not been released. There also doesn't appear to be CCTV footage of Jose from any of the other buildings surrounding his apartment block. It's as if he walked down the stairs and disappeared into thin air. Jose was reported missing about a week later when family couldn't get a hold of him. The last time anyone spoke to him was 3 days before the last images of him were taken. He spoke with his mother on the phone, and it seemed she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. However, the week leading up to Jose's disappearance doesn't seem to be ordinary at all. Jose had been dealing with alcohol and mental health problems for many years. In 2013, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and a different diagnosis of delusional disorder. Losing his job at a mining company only made things harder, and Jose sent what were described as unusual emails to local politicians and police. Jose got the mental help that he needed, but he had a handful of run-ins with police over the years. It's not known what Jose's mental health was in the build-up to his disappearance, but just days before he spoke to his mother, Jose had been stopped by police again. He was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol. 2 days before Jose disappeared, he went into the city and had a dinner at a restaurant, which is described as unusual behavior for him. The following day, he went into the city and had breakfast at a different restaurant. Why he did this, or if he was alone at the time, is not known. Jose was officially declared dead in 2020, but a body has never been found, and police have no clues as to what happened to him after he reached the bottom of his apartment staircase that day. Number 3. Comic artist Gordon McLean disappeared shortly before Christmas in 2019 and hasn't been seen since. Gordon was a successful artist and writer, and in December of 2019 was busy promoting his new book. On December 16th, he wrote a guest blog for a comic website. It was scheduled to be posted 2 days later, the same day that the first issue of his new book would be released. By the time the post was published, Gordon had already disappeared and hadn't been seen by his friends or family since. The 39-year-old left his home early on December 18th and was spotted at around 8:30 a.m. on the streets of Scotland. From there, Gordon caught a train to nearby Glasgow Central Station. It's not known whether Gordon had any planned engagements in the city, but it would make sense for him to go to one of the bigger comic stores to celebrate. Any information about what Gordon was doing in Glasgow hasn't been released, though police have revealed 2 CCTV clips from that day. The first showed Gordon getting off the train at Central Station, walking with dozens of other commuters. A second clip shows him walking down a busy Glasgow street. He's alone and appears to have a destination in mind as he walks. It's not known for how long Gordon was in Glasgow, but the last sighting of the artist was at another train station an hour's train ride away, at about 3 p.m. He soon left a nearby train station and hasn't been seen since. It was very unusual for Gordon to have disappeared in such a way, but Gordon's family didn't report him missing until December 26th, more than a week after he initially disappeared. Police immediately began an investigation, and the family released a plea for information, as they worried about Gordon's well-being. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to have been any update since January of 2020. Number 2. Simi Abrams vanished on March 21st, 2019, hours after he discharged himself from a hospital in York, Canada. His family believe he voluntarily disappeared, though for what reason they don't know, and hope to see him again one day. Simi was a 24-year-old student living with his mother at the time of his disappearance. He showed no signs of being unhappy with his life or wanting to get away, but that suddenly changed on the day of his disappearance. For reasons unknown, Simi visited a hospital in Richmond Hill. His father said he'd not gone for any sort of injury, but it's believed he sought medical help. He was released with permission from medical staff at around 12:30 p.m. Simi didn't have a vehicle, so he was traveling on foot when he left the hospital. Hours later, when Simi still hadn't returned home and his family hadn't been able to get in contact with him, they alerted the police. What's particularly strange about this case is how soon after the last sighting of Simi, the police began to search for him, but there's no sign of him since that day. Between 11 and 11:30 p.m. that night, police found Simi's mobile phone on a path in a woodlot near Bathurst Street. It was determined the phone had been left there at about 1:30 p.m., which would have lined up with how long it took Simi to walk there from the hospital. An hour later, Simi was caught on CCTV at a Walmart. Again, the timings and distance were consistent with him traveling on foot. While there, he bought food, foil trays, and lighter fluid, leading police to believe he was preparing to make a makeshift barbecue in the woods. He was last seen at around 3:30 p.m., walking along Teston Road. It seemed as though he was walking towards a nearby wooded area, but he hasn't been seen since. Despite multiple searches and pleas from his family, Simi hasn't been seen or heard from since then. Police have been working to try to extract data from his phone to see if it contains any clues about his whereabouts, but there doesn't appear to have been any update. Number 1. There are countless stories about young people leaving clubs after a night out and apparently walking into oblivion. There's no indication anything is wrong and no possible clues as to what could have happened. That wasn't the case in the disappearance of Rory Johnson Hatfield. Rory was not last seen strolling down a street, but instead on a balcony of a sheltered living accommodation block for the elderly. He got onto the balcony by scaling the wall outside. Why he got there is just one of the many questions his family is asking. Rory was 29 years old at the time of his disappearance. He and a group of friends went into York Town Center on November 19, 2015. It was the night that the Christmas lights in the area would be switched on for the first time that year, and the area was extremely crowded during the early evening. Rory and his friends spent a few hours catching up at a bar but didn't stay out too late. According to his friends, Rory had only had a couple of pints and wasn't particularly drunk when they went their separate ways after midnight. By that point, the streets were much quieter, and CCTV footage of Rory's walk away from the city center shows him crossing paths with very few people. The CCTV shows Rory walking down a few streets at around 12:30 a.m. before he begins to jog and then run. There doesn't appear to be any reason for this. None of the recordings show anybody chasing Rory or something that he may have been running towards. These things could simply be out of the frame, but it's also possible Rory was running for some innocent reason, like trying to warm up on the cold winter night. However, his behavior became even more strange when he decided to scale the outside of the sheltered living accommodation block. CCTV from inside the building shows Rory walking past the windows that look out onto the balcony. He looks over the edge, appearing to hold onto the railing the whole time. He reaches the far side of the balcony and out of the side of the camera. What happened after this point remains a mystery. The balcony overlooks a nearby river. The water levels of the river were particularly high on the night of the disappearance, and it's speculated Rory could have fallen in, either voluntarily or accidentally. Repeated searches of the river came up with nothing, and in the years since his disappearance, police have come up with very few leads and even fewer answers. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.